right, that's it. When we finished up yesterday, we were talking about stratifying the ethers of the vital body. That is, separating the soul ethers from the biological ether, so that the soul ethers could be detached and the spirit could go away from them at night. Now, the results of this is that a person who has, even partially, just from our doing our retrospection day by day, we become sensitives. And sensitives are people that are attuned more to the inner world than most people are. The people who are perfectly attuned to this outward world don't get ill, and they're perfectly at home in this world. And it is the sensitive that never feels at home here. But the person who is of the world, that is a worldly person, if they were to hear this kind of talk, they'd think it's all crazy talk, and they'd laugh about it, and they'd make a joke about it, and they'd say, you should hear what I heard last night, and they'd laugh behind their breath, or maybe even outright. Now, when the soul ethers are detached from the biological ethers, it doesn't mean that they can't be re-engaged. They have to be re-engaged, or we would not have sense perception. We would not have all the faculties that go along with the light in the reflecting ethers. We would have no memory. So the stratification is such just that the binding, so that the vital body is bound together as a whole, that is broken up, and it's broken up so that we can leave and then come back in. Now, there's another form of exercise that is important in organizing the vital body, especially organizing the soul body. It's just, you might say, a physical or reorganization that takes place in stratification. The other is a different kind of thing that goes on. The soul body, as we've been talking about it, we say it is sort of knit together and that it is polarized. But in reality, that's thinking of it too much like a solid. It's extremely fluidic, and it's, compared to this world, it's extremely rare. But that doesn't mean it isn't strong, because magnetism is invisible, and it takes place in the ethers, in the chemical ether, and that invisible magnetism can be stronger than gravity. We can pick up very heavy objects with just a magnetic field. In fact, we can do all kinds of things of magnetic manipulation. Now, along the way, we have mentioned that the ethers are not only fluidic, but that the form part of them has a flow or a flux of etheric energy that passes through it. And this vitalizes it, or energizes it, or replenishes it. You can send a charge of etheric energy through someone, and you can pick up their energy, their whole energy level. In the astrology talks, we talked about a man that lived in Scotland called Magnetic Man. His name was Smythe, S-M-Y-T-H-E. Or I don't know if there was a final E on there. But he was so magnetic that he sat on his cobbler's stool every day when he fixed shoes, and people would come and pay to sit on his stool for a half an hour, because sitting on his stool for a half an hour was more restorative than a week's vacation at the beach, just lounging around and taking in the sun. But controlling the ethers, there has to be the magnetic form, the form that holds it all together, because otherwise controlling the ethers without polar manipulation is a really tricky thing. It's like trying to pick up a handful of smoke. Not easy to do. Now, the basic vital body are mostly associated with the chemical and life ethers is held together by the thought form, by the archetypal thought form that we created before we came to birth. The quality of the material in the etheric body is determined by our past history that is stored in the seed atom of the vital body, but the way it is built, that form, the thought form, holds everything together. The soul ethers are much more indefinite, and they're not held together. In fact, our consciousness in them is not held together. If you have somebody who has stratified the ethers and there is not much soul in the soul body, not much stuff, these are people who space out quite regularly. They're really not clear. Now, to some extent, all of us carries an attitude. All of us carry an attitude about with us. You might call that a soul stance. And that soul stance gives a character to the soul body, and it gives it some kind of, I don't know how you say it, psychological form, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that gives the soul ethers a coherence and a kind of organization, and that there is strength, and that there is a consistency in consciousness in the soul ethers. Now, we've been saying again and again that the ethers, especially the soul ethers, are fluidic. And because they are fluidic, they are subject to principles of fluid dynamics. And there's one factor of fluid dynamics that is especially important. And that is that things are transmitted or communicated or transported through the ethers by wave activity. And what is especially strong is if it is rhythmic wave activity that is steady and constant. I've gone hiking up in the woods. I can remember one time, especially in the Porcupine Mountains Park up in northern Michigan, when I was a very young man, about 15 years old, something like that. And we went swimming in a lake called Mirror Lake. You had to hike 3 miles back in. First time we tried it, we didn't make it because it was the season where there were all those Canada flies, those nasty little tiny things, and they got all over you, and it was not pleasant at all. But we did get into that lake, and we did go swimming, even though it was, I think it was early June. And there were still remnants from when that had been logged. And there was a great big log in the lake. And of course we tried to do log rolling, but we weren't successful at that either. But it was fascinating to me how that big, heavy log, you could push it because it was buoyant, and you could move something that you wouldn't, if it were on dry land, you wouldn't have any chance to even get a little jiggle out of it. And the thing of it is, if you make waves and make waves regularly, you can move a very heavy log or something that's floating in the water. You can move it along by the wave action. I'm sure everybody's, when they were young, has played with the rubber duckies in the tub, and you just, at the end of the tub, you just go up and down with your fingers, and the rubber ducky gets moved across the tub. Something like that is how the etheric flux works, except it's not just at the surface, it goes right through. Because our bodies are suspended in the ethers, it's not surprising that we have regular rhythmic patterns to everything. The biological organization of the physical body is built on regular cycles. Some of the cycles are very short, like the metabolic Krebs cycle that takes place on the cellular level is measured in 10,000ths of seconds. And then we have something going all the way up to the female menstrual cycle, which is on the average 28 days. So the whole lifetime itself, if we think in terms of all of the worlds that we pass through in the life cycle, that's a cycle that lasts hundreds or thousands of years. Now, we can take advantage of this proclivity to cycles by living regular rhythmic lives, especially if we take advantage of what are called circadian cycles, which are the 24-hour cycles. Now, we've all experienced some of the disadvantages of being in a broken rhythm. The best example probably is jet lag. But if we take children who are in the Platt-like stage between 7 and 14, we can see it all the time. If you keep a child like that up past bedtime, they get limp. They get like a plant where the etheric body has been left out and just tip over, so to speak. But if you keep that child up longer yet, it gets into the ethers. And another name for the ethers are the humors. They get to be what we call overtired, and they're giggly. What has happened is like they have caught another wave in the etheric realm, and they're set to go again. The humors are that everything seems funny to them. For myself, I've taken advantage of this, that sometimes I'll get up and I'll just be cranky and I just nothing goes right in the world, and then I'll lay down and take a nap. And I've had it happen that as little as a 2-minute nap has put me in a different wave. I do that a lot with driving because I tend to fall asleep behind the wheel. And now, I'll start out early in the morning after having had a good night's sleep, and I'll drive and I'll get not too far along and I'll be nodding off, and I just pull off the road as quickly as I can, sleep a very little amount, and sometimes I can go for as much as 20 hours, no problem at all. So this is what it's like. There are circadian waves that go through the ethers. Another way we can take care of rhythms, take care of ourselves using rhythms, is to form good habits. Good habits in eating, good habits in sleeping, good habits in exercises, and other biological activities. However, that is a dangerous thing. We tend to fall asleep in habits. And when we fall asleep, we don't see things right. We just take things for granted, and we go along peacefully in our lives, and we're missing a lot of life. This is why it's not only a good idea to form good habits, but to break them and form other good habits, and do this every now and then so that you don't fall asleep. Now, in the etheric soul body, rhythmic action is highly important because there's a psychological element to it. And that psychological rhythmic activity has been found to be very beneficial in spiritual work. There was a case in I think it was either the late 80s or the 90s, where they were in a monastery in France. The monks used to spend a half an hour chanting every day, and they loved it. And then they got a new abbot, and the new abbot said, "That's old-fashioned. We don't do that anymore." And that bespeaks of the Middle Ages. And so they didn't chant. And within a few months' time, the incidence of illness and all kinds of other problems began to set in, and the monks pleaded to be able to go back to chanting, and then things were restored to a pretty good state when they went to chanting. And sometimes in places, chanting and singing and things like that have been beneficial for setting up rhythms in the soul body. Now, the Rosicrucian Fellowship has an activity for organizing the etheric body using rhythmic cyclicity. The method suggested is prayer, a repetitive prayer. And Max Heindel gave us a prayer that he said that was designed especially for students for regular use, so that the prayer was beneficial to the spiritual life. Now, this is nothing new. It's been going, all religions have had this for hundreds and thousands of years. In the Eastern Catholic Church, they've been doing it for quite a few centuries. They use the Jesus prayer. But there are differences in this activity. And the content and the type of prayer varies from group to group. Now, the vital body is subject to suggestion. This is what makes hypnotism possible. You can suggest to the vital body. Advertisers know this, that you don't even have to listen to or believe what their advertisement is, but it just comes to you. It's sometimes better for it to be unconscious, and it begins to work on you. So suggestion is an important thing. So the ideals of the Rosicrucian Fellowship are inculcated into the Rosicrucian students' prayer, which we use often, that we use repeatedly, and that has been designed for such use. And it has loving, self-forgetting service at the heart of the prayer. So we constantly have, if we're doing something repetitive, we're constantly having something with high ideals being brought into us again and again and again. The Eastern Church, the monks and the people do what is called the Jesus prayer. There are variations of it, but it's a really short prayer. It's called, I am a sinner, Lord Jesus, have mercy on me. I am a sinner, Lord Jesus, have mercy on me. And they try to do, I know somebody in this state who tries to all day long recite the Jesus prayer even while doing other things. I think that's a little bit of a mistake, but that's a short prayer. And from our point of view, it is not advisable to do short prayers. Different things will produce different kinds of waves in the vital body. And in conversation with someone who worked with the Jesus prayer, this person found out that one of the consequences of doing the repetitive short prayer was, the person didn't have etheric vision, so he couldn't put it in these words, is that it made like curls, short curls in the vital body, and they weren't subject to being controlled. And the consequence of that was that there would be swoons of energy or swoons of feeling that would overcome the person, and suddenly they would be in tears, and then suddenly it would be all over again. When the vital body is being changed, we're subject to enough swoons as it is, so that is that's not a thing that we want to do. The longer a prayer is that one can sustain without losing continuity of consciousness, so that the prayer as a whole is what is advisable. There's another value to doing it the way we do it. The Rosicrucian students' prayer is a medium-long prayer. It is not a really long prayer, but it's long enough. And because we're all attuned to the same thing, we are in closer fellowship with each other, and we can work together in teamwork. And if we all have a common, so to speak, vibe to our vital bodies, then when we have to work together as invisible helpers in the inner worlds, it's easier to do that because we jibe, because we're all on similar harmonies. Now, with repetitive prayers, there are things to be avoided. Christ in the Bible says, avoid vain repetitions. St. Paul in the Bible says, pray ceaselessly. Obviously, spontaneous prayer that goes on forever and ever, that would be very creative, but it would be very, very hard to do. It would occupy all of your consciousness, which sometimes might not be a bad thing. But the key word to be aware of is vain. We want to not do things in vain. We do not want to be purposeless people. We don't want to be like teenagers that are destructive just because there's nothing else to do and this provides a little bit of excitement. So we want, while we work with repetitive things, we work with our consciousness to stay awake in the repetitions and to be very, very alert. The object of spiritual exercises is to awaken us. We are to become more and more awake to higher and higher things. And if the net effect of doing a spiritual exercise is to lower our consciousness or to have us less aware, that's not what we want. We do not want to do exercises that put us to sleep. So, repetitive prayer is a very powerful thing for organizing the vital body so that it has its own hum and its rhythm to it. But we must always be deliberate. And we must always be awake in such a way that when intuitions come into the vital body, we can recognize them and we can respond to them quickly. I don't know how many times I have worked through the Rosicrucian student's prayer, and I have had no ill benefits from it, but I must say that it keeps you on your toes. All right. Before we move forward with the last little bit that we have to offer, let's review. A lot of people don't like reviewing, but that's a foolish mistake to make. Throughout the entire evolutionary creation, review is one of the most important things that we do. Everything that we do is reviewed. Everything that we do, especially when we begin something new, is repeated. And when we build something new in the evolutionary creation, which is very slow, very perfect, very exacting, so that we get the best that we can and that we get just what we need in evolution, there is recapitulation. So all of these are forms of reviewing something and doing them all over again. So let's look at what we did. First, we looked at the nature of the four ethers and how they fit into the big picture. When we're talking about building the soul body, we're talking about where the ethers fit into the human constitution and how humans fit into the whole creative scheme at this time. We were very brief about that, but we got at least some sense of proportion, and that was enough so that we could see things clearly. Then we looked at how the ethers, what they are like, what their nature is, their biological function, their soul function, and other things. And then we looked more at the two soul ethers. And for the last 2 nights, we have been looking at how we attract the soul ethers by our attitude, by our consciousness, by what we do. Since the vital body is a body that is of vital action, the actions that we take is attract things. So the ethers are becoming thicker, and they're becoming more rich and dense in our vital bodies as time progresses. This is why there are a lot of people that have conspiracy notions and they have fear notions that people are trying to overpower us and that the rich and powerful are going to have us all as slaves. And I don't believe that at all. Not in the least. Because most people that you meet are conscientious. And in their conscientiousness, they do things from their heart. And they do all of the things that are necessary to build a soul body. Life itself, even if we're not on the accelerated path of seeking initiation, life itself is building the soul material in us. You know, it isn't a special surprise to us that suddenly we're treated with a new heaven and a new earth. Things have been building toward it all along. This is, you know, the evolutionary creation is a process, and in that process, the next step is found coming out of the steps that have been before, and it's all set up that way. So, as time passes, more people will have more soul body, which means they will have more ether. And which means they will be more subject to intuitions, and more people will be able to tune in on the truth, and nobody will be able to mislead them with propaganda or advertising campaigns or whatever, because they'll know the word of truth and they'll follow it. We are already planning, we are told, if we have greater clairvoyant vision, we're told that preparations are already made for the bringing in of the next globe for our evolutionary progress. And the next globe is going to be in the ethers. So that when the physical globe dissolves, behind it or around it or within it or all of the above will be the etheric globe, which is, in Rosicrucian parlance, is called the New Jerusalem, which is said to come down from heaven. Now, some things, this is a little speculative, but some things that are happening in the world are show this is already happening. For example, if you look at a physics book like the Physics Lectures by Richard Feynman is a good example of this, and you look at what Max Heindel describes the ethers as being like, the characteristics and the relationship to light and things like that, is that what is called ultraviolet light by physics is very similar to some of the properties, the main properties of the ethers. So the ether's already coming in. And the hole in the ozone layer, even though it is probably made from greedy stupidity and no forethought, is bringing in more ultraviolet light, or bringing in more etheric stuff. And it's not always gentle. The ultraviolet light can be pretty aggressive. And, you know, in the southern parts of South America, it's so bad that the rabbits have cataracts on their eyes that they can no longer use their eyes. You can walk up to a rabbit and grab it by the ears and pick it up because the response to the ultraviolet light has been that. And, you know, skin cancer is very common. I have a friend from Australia, and he says on the sheep stations, the people that are out in the sun a lot, they go in every now and then to the doctor and they have cancerous skin cut off. Now this has to do not with the spiritual part of evolution, but the bodybuilding part of evolution. If more and more ultraviolet light or etheric stuff is going to be coming in, we're likely to be overcome. Now we can't, I suppose we could all wear hazmat suits or something like that to keep ourselves protected, but that's no way of doing things. My guess is that we buffer ourselves to the etheric influx. And we buffer ourselves by increasing the etheric stuff in our etheric bodies and radiating it out. Meaning to say that we would have a whole buffer of etheric energy coming up. We have that already, but not with sufficient strength and energy to counter the incoming light, ultraviolet light. Now, the richest part of ether in the body is in the blood. We said that the blood is a gas. So as a consequence, I believe as time goes on in future years, is that we're going to build more and more blood vessels and have them closer to the surface of the body, so that we have that buffer, so that when light tries to come in, that it'll be buffered by our own ethers rather than from the ethers outside. Now, the effect of this physically is that the venous circulation will have to be there to be balanced with the arterial circulation, and so we'll have many more veins near the surface of the skin, and we'll all be blue. And in a lot of the mythologies of the world, it says that in the future there are going to be blue people. Max Heindel even said that there are going to be blue people in the future, but he didn't say why. This is speculation, but it's to me it seems very likely. So let's get back to something that's more in the boat. We as human beings are no longer exclusively takers. We are becoming givers. This is why Christ says it is better to give than to receive. We are becoming part of the creative hierarchies. And in doing that, we manifest new creation. And that involves the soul ethers. That creativity comes from the region of life spirit, which, as the book of Revelation says, behold, I make all things new. And so there's new creation coming in from the life ether, and it works into the soul body. The process of bringing in the New Jerusalem is augmented if we consciously bring in the ethers into this world. We try to do this every week, and it is really hard work. It's almost impossible work. But if you're trying to grow toward initiation, you're asking to do the near impossible. And so what happens is, we try to reach into life spirit, to draw life spirit, and the drawing is not always what we think it is, where we have a promise that all we have to do is receive it. But we have to make the cup to receive it into, and that cup is made by an asking type of prayer. We try to receive life spirit and then project it into the oceanic region of the concrete mind, and when that is done, it becomes manifest as life ether, and very virgin, very potent life ether, which is a kind of panacea. So what we're trying to do is literally bring from the deep into the spiritual worlds, we're trying to bring new life into this world for the sake of healing, so that the healing takes place at the same time that we are resurrecting and uplifting the physical world. After that, we began speaking about assimilating the soul ethers by retrospection. The activity of consciously reviewing what we have done and discharging all of the things that we have that are negative in our attitudes that we have manifested during the day. This conscious activity literally digests the experiences and it absorbs them into the soul body, and some of it, if we are in intentional consciousness, some of it is taken into the spirit as soul food for the life spirit. Now, Retrospection builds the essence of the experiences into the seed atoms of the dense body and of the vital body. So not only do we get immediate use to them, but they're there and ready for use in between lives. So we don't have to spend a lot of time in between lives. We can come back and serve because the season is here for finishing up the work on this plane of existence. Then we spoke about how retrospection stratifies the ethers of our body, and that's the way of saying that we separate the soul ethers from the biological ethers in a non-violent way so that they can be interpenetrated. This is the organization of the vital body that brings us to be more sensitive. Of course, we have to, when we have that greater sensitivity, we have to be more loving and we have to be more positive in the spirit, or else the sensitivity will be overwhelmed by other people's problems, or will be overwhelmed by the grief of the world, or whatever there is to be sensitive to. And just now we have been speaking about organizing the soul body through deliberate waking repetition, and doing so with a prayer that is of sufficient length to have the desired effect. Now, this is one of the features of the exercises that many people do not understand, and they can be led astray by a lack of understanding. There is a fact that if you talk to anybody about spiritual exercises, that is important. It is a caveat. It is a warning about spiritual exercises. The fact is that all spiritual exercises work. All spiritual exercises are effective. But what you become is what you do. And you want to do exercises that are of such a variety that they are pro-evolutionary, that fit us more for evolution rather than taking us away from evolution. A lot of people have never had spiritual experience. And somebody comes to them and says, try this exercise, you'll find it works, and they do, and it does work. Even if it may be a little wacky or not pro-evolutionary, and then they become sold on the whole philosophy because they see, yes, these people have something, their exercises work. Well, all of the exercises work, but what do you want to become? This is why it's important when people are being introduced to spiritual things for them to see, look at people who have been long-time practitioners and say to yourself, is this what you want to become like? Or is this what the effects of the exercises are upon the person who practices them? This is a really important thing. Krishnamurti, who was a mystic in the last century, the middle part of the last century, he made a really wise statement about it, especially in terms of repetition. He said to somebody, if you say Coca-Cola enough times, you'll have a remarkable experience. And he was right. Things like that do have effect. So, some exercises, they come from beautiful people, but they're not suited culturally for the types of body that we have evolved. I tell the story because it was a remarkable story, especially for my wife. We were going up to Minneapolis one time because she had friends in Minneapolis, and I wanted to see the Minneapolis Center. And we're driving down the highway, and there's a hitchhiker. And we agreed that we're going to pick up the hitchhiker. The hitchhiker gets in the back seat of the car, and we're driving down the road. And I asked him about his spiritual practice with his spiritual society. And he talks, and we talk back and forth about it. And then it's time for him to get off, and we let him off, and he goes on his way. And my wife says to me, oh, how nice it was that we should meet one of your friends along the way. And I said, I've never seen him before. Never seen him. She said, well, are you reading minds now? And I said, no. Did you look at him? And she said, yes. I said, did you notice that he was jaundiced? And I says, that kind of jaundicing is what happens with practicing a certain type of exercise which is not for people of our culture. It is claimed to be westernized, but it really isn't. And so this is an example of looking at things and studying things before you make your choices. All right, as things stand now, we have discussed how to develop a strong, detachable, organized soul body. Our next topic is how to get into it and how to use it. We have already spoken that we can use it in our everyday lives to improve by getting intuitions. We have spoken about enhanced perception by being more alert in the vital body. We have spoken about enhanced memory and a better ability to manifest thoughts. And we've spoken about greater conscientiousness and having a clean conscience. Now these are all nice things. They're all beneficial. They all move us forward in evolution. But it's not the primary objective that we set out to attain in these courses or in the spiritual life. We want to have the experience. What we want to do is we want to be able to manifest thought without destroying brain cells. We want to have more spiritual thought and less material thought. We're thinking of having etheric perception to see the things that we can't see now with our senses, because seeing them would cut away a lot of mistakes that we make for not seeing things as they are. And we're thinking of detaching from the dense physical body and consciously entering the higher worlds so that we can be closer to the source of things. And being closer to the source of things, we can help people more here so that all of us can get off of this sinking ship that's going to dissolve. So we're thinking of becoming better by service, in service, and fulfilling the purposes of the evolutionary creation. This involves another activity with regard to the soul body. Sometimes it's called transference of attention, or sometimes it is called the transference of conscious attention. What this means is that attention is taken away from the dense physical body and placed into the soul body. You see what this means? This means we have to not be so aware and into our physical bodies, but we have to be aware of what the vital body is and what it is in us, and be able to work in that in a way, parallel to the way we work in the physical body. In Christianity, we're told that there has been a fall of humanity. And the Rosicrucian philosophy, we are taught that the fall was the falling too deeply into matter, so that we are exclusively in our consciousness in matter, and we have lost the spiritual vision, and we have hardened ourselves, and we have hardened the world into greater materialism. We were cast out of the Garden of Eden with its 4 streams, which we are taught was etheric consciousness and the flux that flows through the 4 ethers. And we now live in a barren place, just as the Bible says, where things are not as alive and are not as fruitful as they are in the ethers. So we are in east of Eden, the retrograde direction from where we were when we were in the higher state. This is a self-imposed exile, and it's so complete that many, if not the majority of people in the world right now, think that this is all that there is. From the very beginning of infancy, we are indoctrinated into the material world. We in our lives are told to be materially successful. And our indoctrination is almost total. We believe, most of humanity anyway, believes that matter, physical matter, is all there is. It's the sum total of reality. The psychiatrists and the psychologists, who are the official arbiters of sanity, tell us that to speak of inner worlds or other worlds is crazy. They would call everything that we have done here all week crazy talk. And that it is all a product of an overactive imagination. And that's at best. They might otherwise tell us that these are delusions and that we really are insane. Now there are important things to do here in the material world. And probably foremost is developing waking consciousness. In the entire life cycle, this is the only place that we really awake self-consciousness. But when we have that self-consciousness, we can expand it to our other bodies. We can expand it here in the physical plane, but it doesn't have to, that doing it here in the physical plane doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all. Because most people have gone beyond developing waking consciousness here in that they've gone into indulgence, which has put them to sleep and has made them insensitive to becoming more awake. The only time they become more awake is when they get illnesses. From a healthy point of view, that takes into account our entire being, body, soul, and spirit, and everything in between. This exclusive focus into the external world is really nothing but a bad habit. A bad habit that can have very dire consequences, including excluding us from continuation in the whole evolutionary creation, including insanity. Because if we become so materialistic, we stretch the elastic fibers, so to speak, of our inner constitution until things begin to snap and we lose contact with the spiritual world progressively more. Now, fortunately, like every other bad habit, it can be broken. And it must be broken if we want to benefit the world and benefit ourselves. However, it's a very deeply ingrained habit. And with everyone around us being subject to the same delusional bad habit, to see things differently is difficult because everybody's suggesting something else and suggesting that we're crazy for even thinking differently. Breaking this habit is done like breaking any other habit. It's simply a matter of removing our attention from consciousness in this world and putting it somewhere else, putting it in the next world. Now, for many millennia, we've grown accustomed to the material world, and we have learned how to be in it. And we are comfortable. Even though we have all these illnesses and everything else, we're comfortable with it. Only the dreamers like ourselves are the ones that are uncomfortable with it. Experiencing something that's completely new and completely different is difficult. Because we're basically against the whole world is against us. We have to have security in our existence. Security in our existence is another name for faith. Just think of the fear of death. And when you're ready to leave your body, it's going to feel like you're dying. And there's a lot of fear in that. And if you go out too fast or you chase back in too fast, you can destroy the etheric brain so that you have epilepsy for the rest of your days. We have to have faith. As it is, we have to be careful of being like horses. If there's a fire, we can escort the horses out of the burning stable, but the horses go into a panic, and in their panic they'll run right back into the burning stable, because that's where they have their security. That's where they feel at home. And something similar to that is what takes place with us in our consciousness. Now, the discrimination exercise that we mentioned a couple of days ago is a good way to begin detaching from matter and form. Because in discrimination we try to understand the meaning. And that's such an enjoyable thing and such an engaging thing that when we get involved with meaning, we are pulled away from form. Very healthy way to begin. It's not the end, but it's a good way of changing our attention. But the Rosicrucian Fellowship has another exercise for accomplishing the transfer of attention. This exercise, the time that it is performed, is as critical as the time that the going to bed exercise is. When we do retrospection, when we go to bed, we do it at the time when we have nothing to look forward to and everything to look backward at. We're tired at that time, and when we're tired, it's very hard to the desire body or the internal adversary functioning in the desire body is happy to put us to sleep because it doesn't want to lose its power. So we have to really want to grow spiritually to do retrospection, but that's the right time for that. This exercise is called the morning exercise. It would be much better if it was called the waking exercise, because it is performed upon waking no matter what time of the day we awaken. And sometimes it's even performed before awakening. At the time of waking, if we've had a restful night's sleep, the vital body has been strengthened by the waves. Here we have the waves again. The waves going harmonically through the higher worlds restore the vital body so that it's strengthened, at least the higher ethers of the vital body. The lower ethers of the vital body have been very active, especially at the negative pole of the life ether, and even more so at the negative pole of the chemical ether, which is where all the catabolism takes place. And when we're asleep at night, we are catabolic creatures. And so the physical body gets cleansed from all the breakdown of the activities of the day. And so when we awaken, we are virgin. It's almost as if we're reborn anew. And that is a very important time. And that is when we want to do the exercises. We want to do this exercise before we make any motion, because any motion involves desire. And desire, because desire is what moves the muscles. And desire would just as soon not have us overcome it because of the personal ego that we have invested in the desire body. So we're like new babies. And so we are suspended in the dense physical body, in the vital body, whether we're aware of it or not. That's what happens. So, if we learn to put our attention into the vital body at that time, we are putting it in the vital body at a time that we can learn how to do it so that we can do it volitionally at any time. It's not easy. Just try to think of something like the Rosicrucian student's prayer and not move your larynx. Think the meaning of the words without moving your larynx. It's a hard thing to do. Because when you're moving the larynx, you are engaging the desire body in the muscles. Now this does happen. It's not so hard that it doesn't happen. That sometimes we get engaged in something and it gets our attention, or we give our attention to it so much that we are completely oblivious to the external chemical region of the physical world. The thing is, we have to do that volitionally. And we have to do that volitionally with something that is very subtle. Now, fortunately, the higher things, to ponder the higher things, is very, a very rewarding thing. So there are plenty of inner spiritual things to put our attention on that will engage us, or that we can engage ourselves in consciously. So there's plenty of incentive. The Rosicrucian Fellowship, in its teachings, recommends focusing on something that's not of this world at all. Now, Rosicrucian students who have committed themselves to the Inner World Rosicrucian Order for a probationary period, all of us are prisoners on probation. We're prisoners of the material world, and we're on probation to being freed into a higher world. We try to focus on the first verses of St. John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by it, and without it was not made anything that was made. In it was life, and the life was the light of ones. And the light shined in darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. That's enough right there. That's completely other world, completely different. And from my experience, which is not great, from my experience, there is enough in those few verses to keep us busy and keep us engaged in something very, very lofty and far from the concerns of the material world. This takes us and puts us into a very high spirit of consciousness. It is engaging us to the creative spirit. Listening to the creative word, you don't do that with ears. And when the light is there, you don't do that with eyes. You understand that this is a higher kind of sound and light, where eyes and ears will only be a distraction. So we have to focus on something very, very subtle. Now, there are all sorts of other features to this exercise. This is not intended to be a series of talks and exercises. Maybe some year we'll do that all over again. But this is enough to give you the idea of what it is like to put your attention into the ethers and that are receiving intuitions and receiving things from the higher worlds without carrying them into the dense physical body and even the biological ethers of the physical body. So there are other variations of the same exercise. For example, Max Heindel tells us that it's perfectly all right, and he doesn't recommend it as the morning exercise, of visualizing something. And visualizing something so that you can see it and touch it and feel it, and that it has all the characteristics of something that we have in physical space, and then dropping it. And when you drop it and let go of it, then your attention is forced into the ethers into which your visualization has been formed. And when you do that, you are capable of looking into the inner worlds. That's something you could do at any time of the day. It's an important thing that the primary exercise is done at awakening, and that the attention is focused inwardly. With that, a person becomes conscious of the higher vehicles. And what happens is that with that you can experiment with your own consciousness. Meaning to say, you can put your attention into an etheric stream. And in that you are opening up a volitional etheric vision. The way it is described in the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception, or I should say the pituitary and pineal glands in their energetic counterparts are where one directs that stream, and that stream between the pituitary body and the pineal gland is another one of those waves that you set vibrating that is a communication of spiritual spinal energy that comes up the spine. After that, Max Heindel says you can become consciously aware of your desire body within the etheric body. And he says you can begin to set the vortices spinning as an act of will. And in that, you become a full-fledged seer. In fact, the Cosmoconception goes so far as to tell you what you do to leave the body when you're in this state. It tells you very clearly what to do. But how to be able to get to that takes, at least it's taken for me, many, many years, and I've made a little progress. And I'm happy for every bit of it. And, if you've got patience in a spiritual life, you know that whatever there is, you're going to be able to do it as long as you don't give up. Just keep working on it. So there are advanced stages where you learn to take soul flights and things like that, but you don't have to worry about that. If you're living the life that attracts the soul material, that you need to be able to take soul flights, and if you're working on the exercises to organize and to put your attention into the soul body, you don't have to worry. Because it's like the Bible says, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. There are teachers in the Rosicrucian order that would love for us to make progress, a lot of progress. They would be there repsco depsco right in the moment to help you if you were ready, because there's a lot that needs to be done. And there are a few people who are capable of doing. So you don't have to worry that no one is going to, that no one's going to be around you. You don't have to go traipsing around the world looking for the teachers, where you don't have to go to India, you don't have to go to the Czechoslovakian border or whatever. It's just a matter of practice. It's something that may take a long time, or it might be short. It might snowball. It's very hard. That's one of the things. It's very hard to tell our own readiness. It's very hard to tell the readiness of anyone. Over the years in the bookstore, I've had a lot of people come in that were spiritual seekers. And I thought some of them, wow, this is somebody who's really going to go places. And you put a lot of time and effort into trying to help somebody like that, and it doesn't happen. Then again, you might be talking to somebody like that, and somebody looking at the books in the store overhears a little bit of the conversation, and they take off. And their life changes, and they become different people. So unless you have that clairvoyant vision, and unless you have the knowledge of the experience itself in yourself, you can't see things clearly. You might waste your efforts on somewhere that's not going to pay off real quick. Whereas there are other people that are ready that you can help. At this point, most people would think that the logical thing to do is to discuss what the experiences of the etheric vision or the desire vision or whatever are. This is often done, and sometimes it's helpful. I had a friend at one time that used to go to Los Angeles and have an audience and look at people, the colors of people's auras in the audience and go, oh, this means that person is us like that. And people were fascinated, but they didn't go and live a spiritual life. I'm not a full-fledged clairvoyant. And I don't know when I will be. I keep working at it. But I can't say for certain, but I think telling people about the glories of the inner world and not about how they work and what it means, which are things we can know, it might even be a sinister activity. In the first place, it's suggestive. And too much suggestivity front-loads somebody. It approaches hypnotism. It can skew somebody's consciousness so that they see things in a certain way. Clairvoyant investigation said that John Calvin had a time in purgatory that was way, way, way longer than other people, because he wouldn't believe that he was dead. He wouldn't believe that this is what it's like when you're dead. So we don't know that. It's sufficient to say that it's very different. In some ways, unexpectedly different. If you look very carefully at the writings of Max Seindel, he doesn't do a lot of descriptive phenomena. Well, once in a while, here and there, he'll say, well, I looked at this letter first in etheric vision as it was all folded up in an envelope, and then I looked at it with desire vision, and I said, oh, these people who are doing this psychic phenomenon are doing it in the desire world, and they're not doing it with the etheric clairvoyance. He does little things like that, and you can do that, but he intentionally stays away from sensationalism. He intentionally stays away from too many psychic phenomena. Because clairvoyance is not where real spiritual vision is. The real spiritual things are occult. They're hidden. We can't see them. The consciousness that knows anything, that consciousness is in the spirit. So, if you look at the phenomena instead of at the meaning of the phenomena, you're dealing with illusion. The worlds aren't illusion, and things that are in the world are not illusion, but to look at them without purpose makes them illusional. Spiritual consciousness is all important. We haven't spoken a lot of it in these talks, but there's a lot of evolutionary process built into the creation. The process, one of the principles of the process is experience first, meaning later. Meaning that is inherent in the experience. So we can't talk about all the phenomena of clairvoyance or being out of the body until we can do it. And when we do it, then we are prepared to see through the phenomena and understand the meaning afterwards. If we experience the resistance of matter and the sustaining forms in matter, we, in that experience, develop the power of will to make our way through matter. For a long time now, we have been experiencing in our waking spiritual consciousness the lowest realm of physical matter. This, very fortunately, I didn't intend it this way, but our life cycle, when from rebirth to rebirth, has been from the region of abstract thought down into the chemical region of the physical world, and then back up, and then around and around again and again. When we awaken etheric clairvoyance, we function more deeply, especially in the future. Everybody will do this. As deep as we will go, it will not be necessary for the universal spirit to hold the chemical region into the state that it is in forever. It'll just be dissolved. And then our life cycle will be between the etheric realm at the bottom and the life spirit at the height of our consciousness. We have been living while in the material world, we have been living under the religions of the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, the Jehovistic religions. And since everything is discrete in this world, we have learned separation. We have learned separation, and in relation to that separation, we even think our bodies are separate and that we aren't really connected. And in that identification through the body, if we don't get hooked on it, we recognize our selfhood. We recognize ourselves as individuals. When we have passed through the physical and into the ethers, we're talking in an evolutionary sense, and at the top of the life cycle, we then enter the religion of the Son, the religion of the life spirit, the religion of the Christ, the true religion of Christ, which we don't know now unless we've had and continue to have consciousness in the region of life spirit. And so then ourselves will voluntarily find himself in the selfhood of all things. We won't have to practice altruism. We will be automatically altruistic because we will love the love that holds us all together because it's part of all of us. That's what the future is, and that's what we're working toward when we are trying to build a soul body and when we're trying to get out of physical things. It'll be a different kind of consciousness. As we've said, the evolution is such that we go through many, many different kinds of consciousness, and as we do so, more and more different sides of the spirit are brought out. So, when this happens, in our etheric nature, we will do exactly as the Bible says. We will hear the shepherd's voice, and we will follow the shepherd. We won't have to do our own thing. We'll have confidence in our individuality because our individuality is valuable to the whole cosmos. But we will have security. We will be in that one loving existence. So we've been talking for the past week about the journey of 1,000 miles. And we have said in the beginning that the journey of 1,000 miles is accomplished by taking the next step. So we've been talking about the next step. And we can see that the ultimate purpose of taking the next step is that the next step is not only a step forward, it's a step upward. That's it.